Welcome back to episode 2 of All Things Superannuation with our SMSF guru, Alan.
Hey everyone.
So today we're going to talk about buckets. And that seems like a really random thing to talk about on a superannuation show, but buckets are really, really important for understanding everything when looking at your entire position and your entire portfolio. So talk to me about buckets.
One of the things that I like to do with people, particularly as they're just starting to look at paying off their mortgage and starting to build wealth, is putting everything that you own into buckets. So there's a super bucket, a personal bucket, as well as maybe for some people a business bucket as well. And those 3 buckets are what really drive you throughout life.
So these buckets are basically where you're building your wealth.
Correct.
And obviously inside your business, you're building up a huge wealth as you're growing astronomically and you're, buying more assets and you're making more profit, etc., etc. So you're building up this great asset base, but you're also generating an enormous amount of cash.
Correct.
Hopefully. One of the things that we always talk about in L-Platers at Growthwise is understanding what you want to do with the profit that you make in your business. Whether you want to reinvest it into your business bucket, whether you want to give it to yourself personally, or perhaps whether you want to actually start to top up and fill up your superannuation bucket. Why is that really, really important for people to look at in totality?
I think super's been one of these really misunderstood things over time, and that it's just this thing that you have to pay when you're employing people and eventually you get it when you stop working. But that's not the reality. The reality is super is something that you can take control of right now and really understand exactly where you have your money invested and how much you've actually got in it. So that can be as simple for a husband and wife as pulling your superannuation together into one bucket, which is a self-managed super fund.
And for business owners, how important is it to understand that your business is not the only bucket that you need to take an interest in and that you need to take control of?
Well, it's a really big thing for business owners because so many of them think that the business is going to be their superannuation fund, so they don't contribute to it along the way. And that's such a big mistake people make. The reality is superannuation is the lowest taxed vehicle that you can possibly have in order to accumulate wealth. And if you're successful at business, you're going to accumulate wealth really quickly. So you need to understand exactly what you can put in super and make that money work exactly the way you need it to.
Okay, so we'll put the disclaimer here that, none of this is investment advice, and please don't listen to what we're telling you to do as investment advice. But let's maybe work through a scenario of someone who's 35 years of age, running a business, doing really well, growing their business. What are the things they should be thinking about for their superannuation fund as an example?
So when you're successful at business, you start earning a lot more money. And it's very easy to get used to earning good money. And if you're doing nothing about putting it away for the future, then that's going to cause you a lot of pain in the not too distant future when you stop the business and stop working. So having superannuation at an early age in that super bucket is something that you should be starting to look at contributing to as much as you can, because not only is it actually transferring the wealth you've got into another vehicle, it's also saving tax along the way. And particularly someone that's running a business, if you're growing, premises is such a huge issue, particularly for businesses in Newcastle at the moment, because good properties are hard to come by, and you can actually buy property inside your self-managed super fund and have your business operate out of a property that your super fund owns.
Which is obviously a very exciting thing in that your business becomes the tenant, your super fund becomes the brilliant landlord, and you are effectively then paying your super fund rent as well as the contributions that you would ordinarily be making year on year as well.
That's spot on.
Talk to me about the asset protection that offers at the same time, because running a business is obviously hugely risky, and we try and mitigate or at least minimise that risk as much as possible. What happens when, I own my building that my business operates in my self-managed super fund? Is that protected as an asset?
It certainly is. Superannuation in the current law is actually a protected asset. Even in bankruptcy, most of your super is protected. It's only in very rare circumstances that someone would be able to access it. So if you're, not that we have a plan for bankruptcy, but if you're planning a future in a long-term business, then having something like a property inside a superannuation fund is a fantastic tool to not only protect your assets, but also keeping that wealth in that low-tax environment, like we said before.
So as a 35-year-old business owner, I might be growing my business rapidly. I'm doing really well. I've got some excess cash flow left over. I could be pumping the maximum amount of contributions into my self-managed super fund. My self-managed super fund could purchase the property that my business actually is working from, and I could then pay that super fund rent. And then in my personal name, I can also have a ton of other assets that I might like to accumulate as well.
Correct.
So it really is those three distinct buckets where, you can be doing whatever you want to do personally, whether that's buying a house or whether that's playing in the share market or doing whatever you want. Having your business really is that middle wealth bucket that can, pour over the sides to go into everything else, and certainly looking at super as, the magical bucket that's brilliant tax environment and really, really helpful from an asset protection point of view at the same time.
That's right. So not only that, we also have the ability for the people that have started early, we're really seeing such a big difference with them in their 50s and 60s about how much more they've got inside that super bucket. It makes it for a much easier for retirement for them. Low tax, lots of money, more could you want?
And it's great for, we see so many 50-year-olds who think about it and say, oh dear, I've only got 10 or maybe 15 years before I want to retire. And there's this mad rush to actually try and save for retirement, which is something that has to be done if you're 50 and looking at retiring in the next 10 or 15 years. But for anyone who's young and starts that right now, they're obviously going to get to their 50s and be able to enjoy life a hell of a lot more, because they're going to be comfortable and ready to retire at whatever age that ends up being.
That's exactly
when we're ready to retire. And I guess on that note, that's why it's important to have personal wealth and business wealth and superannuation wealth, as having the three buckets is where you're going to have the most opportunity and the most control over what you do later in life. Would that be correct?
That's exactly right. And particularly with the changes in super laws coming in now, there'll be a limit as to how much money that you can put into super over the years. So it's not just super, it's that personal bucket as well that will really set you up for an easy retirement when the time comes.
So no matter what age you are, you definitely need to start to think about all of your assets and all of the wealth that you're building in three separate buckets, and make sure that you're not just focusing on one. Okay, Alan, I'm pumped about my three buckets, but I haven't actually been spending any time looking at superannuation. And I thought that a self-managed super fund was, only good for someone who was 60. Is that not the case?
Certainly not the case, Steph. It's something that you should be looking at all the time. So if you do have more than one super policy, or if taking control of what you're doing with your retirement is something that you're interested in, you need to come and see me.
And what are some of the options or some of the things that a younger person can look at with a self-managed super fund, as an example?
Okay, you could start with something as simple as a small share portfolio. You could be looking to build towards getting property inside superannuation. You're actually allowed to borrow inside self-managed super and buy properties. And the opportunities that you have with investments are pretty wide.
That sounds like a hell of a lot of fun, but very daunting. So first point of call is ring you, and you will sort everything out.
Spot on.
Perfect.